Hello and welcome. This is going to be the first video talking about Stimpanzee's car paint materials. And this video is going to be a little bit of an overview over the entire system, what's included. In the next few videos we're going to be talking about the differences in between the standard reflection models and the complex models which use scene captures to generate reflections. So in the scene, you'll see that there's two different variations of the paint. The one on the left is the reflection materials, the ones that use the capture actor, and the one on the right is the one using the standard PBR reflections. So when you open this scene, you'll notice that the reflections are actually generating a green hue. And the reason that is because we haven't generated our first captures yet. So to do that really quickly, I'm going to select a scene capture cube in my scene, which I placed earlier. And we'll see here is the screen capture texture target, which happens to be green because we just started the engine. There's nothing on it yet. So to get these generating really quickly, all I have to do is start moving this around. You'll see it's generated a new cube map for me. And those are instantly applied to our materials. So in the kit, we have a couple things that are included. The first ones are the materials right here, just the main materials. We have variations of carbon fiber, car paint, and glass for both standard and regular. So these are the standard materials right here. I can open one of these up right now. And you can see that these are just standard materials which we see every day. This one's obviously a little bit more complex, and I imagine most of you won't be spending your time working within this material. What you'll want to be doing is working in the material instance. So if I close out of that real quick and I create an instance of this, so it's really easy to create an instance of material. All you have to do is right click and create a material instance, and you'll be given one of these. So this is a material instance of that first material, and you can see this is what we get by default. It's kind of just an off blue. It's not particularly special, but within this material we can start changing everything from base color, flake color, density, reflections, properties, all sorts of really cool stuff. And we'll talk about that more specifically in another video. But you can see right here that these copies of the material are actually instances of these with no parameters changed, so they look pretty much identical. In fact, they should be 100% identical. But with using instances, it's possible to change all these parameters which I mentioned. So you can see that in the carbon fiber, this is just creating a tighter weave, and then we have single color carbon fiber, multicolor carbon fiber, and then we have many different examples of what the car paint material is able to do, and this is the most it's the most impressive because it has the most power behind it. So the car paint materials can do everything from standard metallic paint to high glint, high flake size, like hot rod materials. It can do pearlescence and just plain flat colors. It also includes multicolor functions, so you can plug in your own color ID mask and start adjusting the colors. So this has the same mask, but the system allows you to actually change the color parameters for each color ID, red, green, and blue. There's also the rust system built in, which is based off of vertex color. We'll talk about that in another video in more depth. And the car paint material also can generate chrome, which is really nice for especially older vehicles. And then we have the glass examples, which use the same reflections and masking system, but on top of a translucent material. And we can see over here on the right side, we have basically what are copies of all the reflections materials, but based on the standard reflection model. So these are gaining their reflections from the reflections capture. I can move this underground. You can see how it changes instantly. And these are all based off the clear coat model, which allows you to have clear coat reflections with underlying data. Unfortunately, what it doesn't allow you to do is have two separate channels for bump maps. So you can have a top layer which has the classic orange peel effect, but you can't have flake normal map data underneath that. So that's one limitation. But if you get at a certain distance, it looks pretty good, and it gives you the best performance. So all these materials handle their parameters in very similar ways. You can see that we are seeing very similar effects to this set of materials, but they're just running a little bit differently. All right, the next thing we look at is what's included. So this is the main materials. This has a copy of a material and an instance for each one, so you can start playing around right away. In the instance examples, we have two different folders, reflections and standard. In the reflections, that would be the materials on the left. This includes the instances that we were looking at over here in the car paints, as well as the glass and the carbon fiber. And if I was to just open one of these up real quick, you can see that all these parameters are affecting how this surface is being rendered. All right, and the next folder is the standard reflections. Same thing, just based on the different system. Another couple folders that we can take a look at is the level. So the overview map is just the map that we're going to see right here. The mesh is a car paint model that's based off of the models which you see in car paint shops to kind of test out our sprays. I thought it was an interesting way to start seeing the actual materials on a surface, so I included that as well. And then we have the textures. So these are the textures which are helping drive the system. Carbon fiber includes a masking system, the normal map, and then we have a color ID mask, which is just a standard mask, which kind of is a placeholder for this color system. And then we have a couple different versions of the flake normals. Flake mask is helping drive the individual flake patterns. So you can see there's tiny little specks of light here. This is helping driving that, and it's also got a grunge channel, which is helping out as well with the reflections. Then we have three different sizes of rust, and rust normals, and the texture render target, which is what we looked at a little earlier. So when you're using your video game, what you'll want to do if you want completely real-time dynamic reflections is attach your render cube to the object, which is going to be dynamic, which is going to be moving around. And that way, this is looking at whatever is around it in the scene. So you can see this affects the reflections very similar to the standard reflections node. But it gives us a little bit better control over what we're going to have as far as reflections go. And you can affect things like the resolution and different other performance standards, which we'll talk about once again in another video. One thing to remember, which is pretty important, is that only the top layer of this material is being handled by this cube map. The other materials are PBR based, which means you will have to include the sphere or box reflection captures. So you can see that that changes not only the materials over here, but also our bottom coats over here. Alright, so that was just a general overview of what's included. In the next video, we're going to talk about how to get the most out of the standard reflections materials and how to start playing around with the parameters. There's a couple of instances that help us switch between different modes, so we'll talk about that in more depth. Alright, thank you very much. See you in the next video.